Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Males, co-founder of MyRuralRadio.com, and I'm here today to tell you about Friendship Outreach International, who is one of the beneficiaries to this year's My Rural Radio Fall Music Festival. Unless you've been living under a rock for the past 20 years, you may have heard stories about the Lost Boys of Sudan. The Lost Boys of Sudan is a name given to some 20,000 young boys who were displaced and or orphaned by the Second Sudanese Civil War, which lasted from 1983 to 2005. So, speed up to the current date, or a little more than a year ago, a gentleman by the name of Philip Deng contacted me, a York County resident, who had just recently formed a new nonprofit organization called Friendship Outreach International. I invited him here to the My Rural Radio studio, and in our very first meeting, he told me his entire journey from Sudan that brought him here to the United States and why he formed Friendship Outreach International. It's an inspirational journey that tells the story of someone looking for a hand up and not a hand out.
My name is Philip Deng. I was born in South Sudan in 1981. By 1987, South Sudan was under attack by the government of Sudan, and the young boys were the target for the government, and most of the boys were 5 years old, from 5 years old to 15 or 16, and we walk from South Sudan to Ethiopia barefoot. It took us several hundreds of miles. Some of us walk over 1,000 miles to Ethiopia. There were some horrific, stories along the way, from walking barefoot to not having enough food to eat, not having water to drink. So by the time we made it there to Ethiopia, the UN agency, which is a World Food Program, assisted the government of Ethiopia to give us a space in Ethiopia to stay there. And after a year and a half, of course, the government of Ethiopia was at war with the rebels in Ethiopia. So we had to leave Ethiopia in 1991 back to South Sudan, or Sudan at the time. And when we were chased out of Ethiopia, some of us had to cross the river Nile, which is very full of crocodiles and other the creatures there in the river. And some of us got shot at by the rebels in Ethiopia. Some of us didn't even know how to swim. So basically, if you didn't know how to swim, you have two choices: either stand there to be shot at, or just jump in and just take your chance. And that's what most the kids did at the time. We crossed the river back to Sudan again, and some of the kids were eaten by crocodiles along the way. Some of them got killed because they didn't know how to swim, didn't know where to go. And then we went to Sudan and walk several days in Sudan until the UN agency came and UNICEF came and rescued some of us and took us to Kenya. And then by 1997, 1998, we heard about the news to come to the United States of America. This was the agreement between the UN agency and the government of the U.S. to come to the U.S. to get the education and also get the good life. And so by 1999, 2000, I found out that I was among the kids that were coming to the U.S. And so by the year 2001, I went to Nairobi for the final process, which is to be cleared by the medical agency in Kenya. And so I flew from the refugee camp for the very first time to Nairobi. And then in Nairobi we spent a few days there, a couple of days, and then we were cleared to come to the U.S. And that's when I was on my way here. August 28th, that's when I arrived. First arrived at New York International Airport and then to Harrisburg International Airport. I was 19 years old when I came, and then I worked in a few months, and then look into getting into college because I was 19 years old. There was no way. Well, I finished high school in Kenya, but high school in Kenya compared to the high school here is completely different. So we went through the process of getting driver license and everything, and then went to, bought my car. Remember, it was an old car that I bought. Of course, I didn't have enough credit to take loans, so I had to pay, cash. Bought my first car, and then take my friends to work with me. And then few months later, I decided to go to college. So I looked into the process, got all of the requirements that were needed by college, and then went to Harrisburg Area Community College. That's where I started my school. 2 years later, I finished and transferred to Central Pennsylvania College. I was working full-time as well as taking credits full-time. I was taking 15 to 18 credits a semester, working 40 hours a week. Would get up early in the morning, go to school, and then after school to work, and then by midnight I'm home and study and sleep for a few hours and do it all over again. I did that for 4 years. Some of my friends were like, it's hard, why are you killing yourself? But the thing is, going to college and working full-time, I'm earning money, and I'm about to earn the college degree. It was really nothing compared to the life that we been through since 1987. So by early 2014, I went to Uganda mainly to go and help my family settle in Uganda. And as I was just visiting there, I said, you know what, I have to go and see what's going on at the refugee camps in northern Uganda. And as I was visiting the refugees at the refugee resettlement camps and at the reception center in northern Uganda, in a district called Jumani, I came across the people who wanted to tell their stories, how they got to Uganda, sat down on the ground and just kind of listened to their stories. And one of the stories that stuck with me until today was the story of this young lady who has two young kids. She told me how she escaped the war in South Sudan with her two children. Her husband was killed as they were leaving the town. It's called Bor town in South Sudan. And the older boy had witnessed what happened to his dad. So by the time they arrived in Uganda, the older boy got sick suddenly. She tried to do whatever she could as a mother to take him to the nearby clinic runs by the UN agency, and they couldn't do much for this young boy. So they basically told her to go back to the reception center. So I'm sure I listened to her story and kind of listened to what was going on with the young boy, the older boy. I went to the nearest pharmacy in Uganda, and I talked to the pharmacist, not a doctor, just a pharmacist, to explain the symptoms of this boy. And then the pharmacist prescribed two different antibiotic medications. So I came back to the reception center, and I administered those medications to the young boy. Did it the third day that I came back. The young boy was running around. He was better, and the illness just went away like that. And then as I was walking, his mom came. Crying. I thought something happened to her son, and she just broke down in tears and said to me, "Thank you for saving my son's life." And I turned to this young lady and I said, "I did not save your son's life. God saves your son's life." And by the time I came back here to the U.S., I couldn't, just come back and sit and enjoy the life that I have here in the U.S. Without doing anything. So I talked to friends and co-workers and neighbors, and just kind of told them the whole thing that I saw at the refugee camps. And as the result, I was encouraged to do something about what I saw at the refugee camp. And that's when Friendship Outreach International started in 2014. And so by the 2014 October, I came across, I was looking for the technology person to help build the website. So I did my research, came across a few firms in the area, which were very expensive, and there was no way that I could afford to build the website with those firms. And so I was given a number by somebody who was actually helped by this the technology firm. And so I contacted the gentleman named Michael Males, and introduced myself to Michael Males, and I got the appointment with Michael Males and went to the studio. And Michael Males asked me, "Why are you doing this? I want to know the story behind what you are doing." So I told him the whole story about the Lost Boys of Sudan, the reason I was starting to do what I was doing. And Michael Males didn't ask me a second question. He said, "I'm going to build you a website." And indeed, a few weeks later, the website was up and running. And then myruralradio.com, which is the local radio, internet radio that do the community events, selected Friendship Outreach International as one of its beneficiaries. And so last year at the fall festival, we were selected, Friendship Outreach International was selected as one of the beneficiaries. And we did a very successful clothing drive. We did the clothing drive mainly because of the condition that I observed when I was in Uganda. So we did the clothing drive, and the clothing drive was very, very successful. And the clothing are now shipped to Uganda for the refugees to be distributed there in Uganda, which was one of the biggest achievements that we did in 2014. And then early this year, 2015, I went there to Uganda with some of the clothing and the school supplies, and then we distribute the clothing and the school supplies at the refugee camps. People were very appreciative there, and you can just see the joy in little children's faces, because some of them never had two pair of t-shirts or pants or a pair of shoes or school supplies, so they were very appreciative. And then in April, I went to South Sudan where the war started, and I had to go there and see what happened there and how people were living there in South Sudan. And we partnered with the NGO as the agency that provides psychological services in South Sudan. And we conducted very successful workshop. It was called the Trauma Healing Workshop, which was attended by hundreds of local residents. And the stories of the horrific activities that took place in 2013 were shared throughout the workshop. After the workshop, we realized that people were battling with anxiety and depression. And so the Friendship Outreach International teamed up with the organization called SkyMe, and we started to build the community center to provide free counseling services to those people who needed the services in South Sudan. Along with the other projects, We learned early this year that Friendship Outreach International is going to be one of the beneficiaries again for this fall festival in York County. Here's the thing about myruralradio.com. They do the community event just to bring the community and the surrounding together, but also to benefit the charity organizations here in York County, as well as globally in East Africa. And so I'm very excited about the myruralradio.com Fall Festival this year on October 3rd from 11 in the morning until 11 at night.
So, if you've made it this far into this video and weren't too distracted by the number of likes that you were getting on this morning's selfie or your Candy Crush, what you just witnessed was Philip Dang telling the short version of his story for the very first time on camera. I remember when he told me the story the first time, it immediately made me want to do more for this organization, sponsor this organization, and invite you all to come to the Fall Fest 7 for myruralradio.com, which is at Naylor Wine Cellars on October 3rd from 11 to 11. Meet Philip Dang, hear his stories, look at his pictures, learn about the organization, and help us with our commitments to do more for this organization over the next several years. See you at Fall Fest. I'm Mike Males. Have a great day.
The road seems lonely. The road seems lonely. My life seems great. The sunrise is slow.